maybe tell a little bit about how the industry has changed?
The last decade, of the 3 decades I've been in banking, it's probably the more interesting in terms of how people perceive banking, I think, as well as how banking actually is. I think prior to that, banking was a very respected industry. We hadn't had the financial crisis. Everybody thought banks were there to do the right thing. They were very safe. They looked after your money. That has changed quite a bit. I think the last 10 years of banking has pretty much been on the front pages of the financial press on a fairly regular basis, and everybody now has a view and an opinion on that. The two biggest changes, I suppose, have got to be technology and regulation over that same period. Technology is just hugely different. I mean, we don't want to go to branches anymore. I mean, you and I want to sit on our sofa of an evening and do our banking by pressing a button or by talking to a speaker that's sitting in the corner of the room or however technology changes. And yet the counter side of that is that there is always dismay in the press when branches are closing or your statements don't come in the post anymore. Well, I don't want to wait for my statements to come in the post. I want it on my phone. I want to know what it is straight away. If I have a cheque to pay in, which doesn't happen very often, but I don't want to go to a branch to pay in a cheque. I don't want to wait for it to clear over a 3 or 4 day period. We have become a nation of people who want immediacy in our financial dealings. And some of the banks are big, almost oil tanker organisations. It takes a while to change. If you're rolling out new technology in a global institution, it's hard. I mean, it's a lot of change, it's a lot of expense, it's very complicated. It's a huge issue for the old traditional banks, I think, to get that technology right that quickly.
Was that also something that was part of the restructuring?
Interestingly, less so with restructuring, because you were trying to get underneath the skin of what was going on in companies, what had made it go wrong. There's a finite number of reasons companies go wrong, and they don't do it on their own. It's the management who have taken it there, or who haven't spotted regulatory change, or they've had a big project and they've taken their eye off the ball, or they've not used the modern technology and they've just become sort of obsolete. I think companies can be a bit afraid of creative destruction, damaging something you're doing to make a better product, or disruptive innovation is another one people talk about a lot. Companies often are slow to spot that, and if you're really engrossed in what you're doing, you might miss that sort of change happening around you. I mean, case in point would be when the new electricity trading arrangements came in place and all the power companies were suddenly caught, wow, how did that happen? So the technology side impacted them and where they ended up, but from a banker restructuring, you're back with the profit and loss account and the balance sheet and how much have you got in debt and where are you making your money and who have you got that's doing the buying for you, who's choosing your products. It's much more fundamental. Restructuring is much more fundamental. Less technology needed to get to the bottom of how that works.
So what were the challenges that you identified while you were in the role where you did the restructuring and other things? What were the biggest sort of issues that you found?
I think the biggest change we had from when I started in restructuring, which was back in the days of Enron. I started the week before Enron, which is perfect timing if you do want to go into restructuring, because it gives you a very big, interesting case to start with. That was a time when everybody who had lent money to different companies knew that you were going to come out of this probably not getting your money back, and that some people would take more of a hit than others. And we had this structure in the London market called the London Rules, and you were trying to get the best for the company, the best for the employees, the best for the creditors, the best for the banks, but you effectively ended up with the least worst option for everybody, which doesn't sound good, but you knew that you weren't competing. HSBC didn't compete against Barclays or Lloyds or RBS for the biggest restructuring. You were in there together, you'd all lent them money and you were trying to sort it out. Sometimes you would take more pain than Lloyds, sometimes Lloyds would take more pain than Barclays. The secondary trading market was quieter. What you find now is a lot of bankers will trade out of debt quite quickly. So you have people who've come into a restructuring who've not lent at par. You know, they've only paid 50p for the debt. They're not interested in trying to make that debt whole and trying to restructure the company, maybe push the debt out 10 years and you know, try and get it back over a longer period. They're there for a quick buck and that's what they want. So that changed quite a bit, the dynamics of all working together for the greater good. It is much more a case now of whoever is going in is trying to look after their own position, and they don't really have the same interest in making sure that everybody comes out of it okay. It's a bit more survival of the fittest now than it was 10, 15 years ago. I mean, as a relationship bank, we were always trying for the company to come out the other side. We wanted employees to still have a job. We wanted the customers to still be getting the service or the product. We never entered into a restructuring thinking, well, let's just stop this, close it down and walk away. And I'm not sure that that is the case with necessarily everybody who's lending money to companies now. The relationship aspect, I think, has changed. It is much more transactional. And some clients like that. They don't want a relationship with their bank. They want the transaction. They want whatever service they need when they need it. But they don't want to have a middle-aged banker knocking on the door and saying, hello, I'm your relationship manager, let's have a chat for half an hour today. I think banking is changed quite a bit. Restructuring for sure is very different now.
So that's really interesting, that sort of switch almost from the relationship to transactional. Is that a sign of time, or is that, we talked about earlier about technology and disruption and all these sorts of things. Where do you think can be pinpointed?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the idea of relationship management in the financial services industry, it still holds true. I think you need to be able to ring somebody up and say, I've got this idea and I think I want this, and what about that, and what is the best way for me to finance this? But actually there's a whole load of service providers out there. You know, you've got to go and get the cheapest for your company. The best offering is not necessarily with the bank you've been with for a long time. So I think as individuals we've changed. We are much more demanding than we used to be in many different parts of our lives, and financial services is a commodity. It has changed a lot. It's a very, very different world, and I think it'll keep changing.